Good evening. This is Talking Sports with Evan. I'm Evan with Tallison. Obviously, if it's Talking Sports with Evan, I'm Evan. So, with that said, thank you so much for joining the show here tonight. Got a fun show here. Joining me right after 7 o'clock will be Brandon Sneide of 620 WTMJ. You're going to hear him each and every weekday on the morning, Wisconsin's morning news doing sports. He will be on to talk the Milwaukee Brewers and get us ready for the 2023 Milwaukee Brewers season, which they are currently 0-1 at the time being. They lost today on their season opener 4-0, which I will talk about that game in a moment. Brandon and he'll give his thoughts on the season in general once he joins the show and give his predictions, which I'll give my win-loss projection very soon. And not to pat myself on the back, I've been pretty accurate, very close the last several years when it comes to how I think the Brewers are going to do from year to year. So I'll give you that momentarily. Milwaukee Bucks are in action right now as we speak against the Boston Celtics. And if the Milwaukee Bucks can get that victory, they don't quite have that one seed locked up, but they theoretically have that one seed because if the Bucks win tonight, in order for Boston to have a shot at that one seed, the Bucks would have to lose every game the rest of the way, and Boston would have to win every game the rest of the way. And with the fact that the Bucks are going after that one seed, I don't envision them losing every game. They might lose to Philly on Saturday or Sunday, depending on if the Bucks try to play for the win or not. And they're going to have 5 games left in the 2022-2023 NBA season after tonight. So we'll see if the Bucks how they handle the rest of the season after tonight's game. If they lose tonight, then obviously they're going to have to work a little bit harder to get that one seed. But if they win, they pretty much got that one seed locked down, and they just have to get 1 or 2 more victories to definitely clinch it. But right now, Boston is leading the Bucks towards the tail end of the first quarter, and Middleton leading the way right now for the Bucks with 7 points on the app I have on my phone. I know if you're watching the game on TV while you're watching the show, if you're watching it live, you might have a different score than me, but I'm going by what I have on my iPad right now. I don't have the game going live at this moment because I'm doing my show. So before I do talk more with the Bucks, I guess I'm going to give my quick general thoughts on the Brewers before Brandon joins me to talk Milwaukee Brewers. But tough loss today, 4-0 loss to the Cubs, and I definitely did not miss the overreactions on Facebook and Twitter from game to game. I definitely did not miss that. And I've said this every year since I've started doing podcasting, dating back to the Red Light Sports Network with Troy Roberts. Don't get too high on the highs. Don't get too low on the lows. Enjoy the ride. It's a 162 game season. If you overreact or get too excited after every game, you're going to wear yourself out by May. So it sucks they lost, but it's one game out of 162, and there is plenty of time for the Brewers to clear things up. And yes, there are some habits that we saw once again by the Milwaukee Brewers that we saw last year rear its ugly head once again in this game. And it's very disappointing for that fact because the issue they had last year was they couldn't hit with runners in scoring position, and sure enough, today they struggled to hit with runners in scoring position. They had the bases loaded in the third inning against the Cubs, 1 out, bases loaded, and we have a ending double play, which very par for the course last year. So I get it with that. It's frustrating because the fact that we saw this a lot last year, and it sucks that we're seeing it game 1 already. And then I'm seeing a lot of Corbin Burns is toast. He's done. Um, I like Woody better than him anyways, which I like Woody too. I like both pitchers. But it's one game, and Corbin Burns honestly didn't pitch that bad. he had a bad luck inning. It happens in baseball sometimes. And I know it's going to sound like I'm making excuses for him, but sometimes in baseball, you have bad luck innings. And to me, that is what we saw in the third inning, where the Bucks failed to get a run across in the top of the third with the bases loaded. The Cubs are able to basically death by paper cut their way to a 4-0 lead and held on for the win. You had an error by Willy Adames on a bad throw to first. He probably shouldn't have made. Just shows some poor baseball IQ there. You had the one run allowed. You have runners now at the corners. Just eat the ball and try to get out of the inning on the next at bat. That's what should have happened. But instead, Adames tried to throw behind the runner to get the runner out at first. We had the error and another run scored to make it, I believe, 2-0 at that point. Adames had a chance to end the inning. I think it was to end the inning, where he tried to beat the runner to the bag at second base. He got beat to the bag, and next thing you know, we have another run scored. And that might have been to make it 4-0 there. But another defensive blunder caused the Brewers another run. If he just throws the ball to first, gets the easy out, boom, bam, done. But instead, they play poor basketball. Poor baseball. Sorry, I have the Buck score next to me. They play poor baseball IQ in my opinion, and they end up losing 4-0. Pitching in 40-degree weather at Wrigley Field in March, soon to be April, is very difficult to pitch because baseball is about gripping that ball, getting a proper grip of the baseball, feeling those laces so you can get the ball to do what you want and go where you want. And to be honest, both starting pitchers struggled with control. Both of them struggled with control today. Yes, Stroman didn't give up a run, but that's because his defense played so well, and the Brewers are swinging at bad pitches. And I don't think a ball left the infield for Milwaukee this game. I think most of the Brewers hits were. I think most of them were infield out. So with that, I'm going to switch here and get Brandon's take on this game as Brandon's joining us. Thank you so much, Brandon, for jumping on.
Of course.
I was just kind of giving my thought of today's 4-0 loss and how the third inning was basically a death by paper cut inning. It wasn't all on Corbin Burns. It was two boneheaded defensive plays by Willy Adames definitely contribute to that 4-0 loss. But thank you so much for coming on, Brandon.
Of course.
And as you can see, your Twitter for the viewers, Twitter handle is there. So I guess kind of just jump right into it. If you want to quickly let the viewers and listeners know, introduce yourself, and then we can get back to the Brewer 2023 season.
Sure. Yeah, working at WTMJ, doing the morning sports there with Vince, Eric, and Greg Hill. It's been an adjustment period, being there in the morning early.
Getting up at 3 a.m.
I wish it was 3 a.m. I'm out of the door at 3 a.m. But yeah, nonetheless. So yeah, we're talking about Wisconsin sports every day. Today's one of those days where it was an exciting day to talk about sports because the Milwaukee Brewers were opening their season down in Chicago, which can we stop scheduling opening days outside in Chicago and Cleveland and Minnesota and Detroit? I promise you they'll be okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to open them every year, Evan, in Chicago. I promise.
Yeah.
They'll be okay.
Season in Texas or in Florida or in California.
Milwaukee?
Or you get better grips of the baseball, or Milwaukee.
I mean, it's 90 minutes north. I mean, they would have survived, but no. So yeah, I've been working over at WTMJ. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Sneide. And it's just been fun over there at WTMJ. And again, like I was saying, one of those fun days of covering sports was today. The excitement for opening day, and you finally get to it's kind of like the first unofficial day of spring for me, at least as far as when baseball starts, and you get to the ballpark and you have a Brewers game on or a baseball game on pretty much every night of the week. So that was exciting. But the game was just it sucked, like, to be quite honest with you. And it's a microcosm of kind of what I was afraid of, Evan. And I know it's only one game. So like people are got to be like, oh, you got to calm down, chill out. I understand that. The offense is just, it's dead. Like there's nothing to it at all. Like there's no life to the offense. And I know it's only one day, but they struggled in spring training too, with scoring, and especially with scoring with runners in scoring position. You feel for Corbin Burns because that what was it, the third inning, the fourth inning?
Third.
Yeah. Nothing really. I mean, he had a couple balls leave the outfield or leave the infield. Rowdy probably could have had one of them that would have saved at least a run. Willie Adames, doesn't meet the guy at second base prior to getting there. And it's just one of those things where, runs add up, and it's 4 runs, a deficit where you're looking at a major league team and, you're like, well, there's no shift and there's a pitch clock and the pitchers are in a little bit of a hurry. You should be able to put something on the board, and you should be able to put something on the board with that roster in this lineup for the Milwaukee Brewers, because I actually really liked it. Terrain batting 9th, Mitchell's down there, and then you have Yelich at the top of the order. I thought it was going to be a little bit better today, but credit to Marcus Stroman. I mean, the dude, he came ready to play. He was pumped up. He was amped up for his debut in a Chicago uniform. He did exactly what he needed to do. His stuff was nasty. I thought Burns, it was the second least strikeouts he's ever had in a game since becoming a starter. I thought it was weird. I don't know. It just didn't feel like the Corbin Burns that we've been accustomed to, and having the ability to watch over the last few years, since 2018 when he came in as a reliever. So it was just kind of an off day for him. Hopefully it's an off day for the offense. Hopefully they can get it going back again on Saturday. Of course, there's an off day on Friday. But the other question, Evan, is the Luis Urias injury, because it's probably going to be a while. It didn't look good.
Yeah.
And that's a position where they did go out and get Owen Miller, this offseason. You could plug Brian Anderson in at certain spots in the infield. You feel okay with that. I don't know. It didn't look good though for Luis.
Yeah, I missed the injury because I'm at work, and I was listening to the radio, and I had to step out for a home visit, so I missed that injury, unfortunately. Which it
didn't look good. Yeah, it didn't. And he got up and he walked it off, but it's a tissue injury like that, soft tissue injury. They're usually never good.
Yeah, they take a while to heal up, especially if it's I don't know what his is, but if it's a calf or hamstring, those always seem to linger for a while, or oblique or whatever that is. So, and Stroman settled in. Like, to me, he struggled to start. He was a little wild. His balls, fortunately for him, the umpire, and for Corbin, the umpire were giving them constantly that outside corner, which a couple of those calls were way out there, but they were giving the outside corner anyway. But to me, the Brewers let him off the hook. And you talked about the struggling to hit with runners in scoring position. I was talking about a little bit before you jumped in. Big concern for really the last 3 or 4 years. They can't hit when runners get on base. They get base hits. They hit solo home runs, but when runners get in scoring position, they seem to not be able to hit. They get the bases loaded with 1 out, and we get a double play. And to me, that was the ball game, for the fact the Cubs went right into the next inning and scored those 4 runs. And then both Stroman and Burns pitched pretty well the rest of the way for the couple innings they were left in there. I think Burns went 2 quick 3-up, 3-down innings. I think Stroman, one of those innings, gave up a base hit, but still nothing really getting out of the infield. And tough game for the Brewers. Hit one on the chin. The offense will heat up, but the problem is the offense is very streaky, and that's kind of what I want to get your thought on. I know they brought Winker in, who doesn't strike out a lot. If he's healthy, he can hit the ball pretty well. Contreras now behind the plate. But it just seems like, once again, and I know part of that is Yelich's money, but once again, the offense is dependent on, can we get anywhere close to the Yelich from 2018? Is that kind of the vibe you get from the way this offense is built up again?
Yeah. I mentioned it this morning on WTMJ for my extra points. Going into the offseason, coming into the winter with Matt Arnold taking over for David Stearns at the end of October, there was always going to be, for me, more questions than answers, right? And that's not to say like that doesn't happen to everybody, right? Like every team has questions, right? But the Brewers just you don't really have a solution to any of those questions, or at least you're hoping you can get something out of Christian Yelich. If you're hoping, That's not going to be an answer. That's not going to be a solution. And he's at 1/5 of your payroll right now. I mean, that needs to be answered. And he's the anchor for the offense. And when he goes, the Milwaukee Brewers go. And especially where he's batting right now at leadoff, it's kind of be one of those things where he's going to have to produce. A little bit disappointed with Winker today. I was man, did Boxberger lay one down the middle for him? I don't know if you caught that one. It was a full count. It might have been when the bases were loaded. I can't remember the exact situation. Right down the middle. I mean, meatball day. It was a mistake. Boxberger knew it right away as soon as he let it go, and he swung right through it. He missed it. William Contreras had a hit today. Looked like more of an error out in the left field there by Ian Happ, who was a Gold Glover, I believe, last year. But you don't know where the offense is going to come from. That was my problem with this team going into the offseason. That's why when I was doing the Locked On Brewers podcast and I was tweeting out things like, we can talk about how great the pitching is all we want. That's fine. We can't, because they are great. Corbin Burns is going to find his payday, and he deserves every dollar that he's going to get. Brandon Woodruff is the same way. Freddie Peralta, he's going to be here for the next 5 years. He's as good as it gets. The bullpen you saw today, Strzelecki came in, looked really good. Varland had his debut, got into a jam, got out of it, still looked pretty good. You're going to have Devin Williams. You're pretty good with pitching, but it's always been about the more questions than answers. Are you going to get a productive Christian Yelich? Today, you did not. Are you going to get a productive Jesse Winker? And like you said, a healthy Jesse Winker. Maybe he's healthy. He's playing, so you would imagine he is, but he wasn't productive. William Contreras, you would imagine, based off of what we saw a year ago in Atlanta where he went to the All-Star game, that he'll get it going, and I think he's in your 5 hole, which is a great spot for him, in my opinion. Rowdy Tellez didn't have a good game at the plate. Nobody, I mean, what did they have, 4 hits? Nobody had a good day at the plate, but it's the inconsistencies with this lineup, and it always hasn't been that way. But for some reason, the last 2 years, and everybody wants to pin it on Christian Yelich, and I understand why, but somebody else has got to step up. But there's nobody where you look at the lineup and you're like, okay, we got, Adames, Tellez, and Contreras coming up. It's that you don't have that feel anymore. And when you, like you said, you get guys on base, 3 guys, you get the bases loaded, 1 out. Stroman's all over the place. He walked, I believe, the last batter 4 pitches in a row. And you go up there, and the umpire did not do them any favors today. But the calls were just really erratic. But it's frustrating because it was a problem going into the offseason that we knew needed to be solved, right? They were terrible last year. One of the worst teams in baseball last year with runners in scoring position. The spring, it didn't really get a whole lot better. And now you're into the regular season. And I know people that are listening or watching, pump the brakes. It's only 1 game. I understand that, but it's the same problem that we saw a year ago. It's the same issue. Like you said, you can get up there and nobody's on base at 2 outs, maybe 1 out, and you can get a solo home run. What do you do when the guys get on base? What are you doing when runners are in scoring position? And I believe half the time they had runners in scoring position was because Ian Happ just didn't catch the ball on half of them. He just failed to catch the ball behind the plate. So it's just, you hope that going forward, guys, when they get acclimated to where they're playing and things kind of open up, and, hitting in Chicago in March is probably no fun. Garrett Mitchell was grabbing onto his hands. He got jammed up pretty bad today. So you just hope that this kind of works itself out as they go into the season, and hope that they can find that identity. And what is that identity, right? Like, you got a lot of power. Winker, Contreras, Tellez, Adames, who had 31 home runs. That's a lot of power, Evan. Is that their identity? That's what I think we got to figure out. And like Craig Counsell said after the game, every team's a little bit different. Every team's got to feel each other out. I was concerned in spring training. Nobody really talked about it, but I was just they didn't play well in spring training, like really at all. Burns didn't pitch well in spring training. I don't want to say today wasn't a bad day of pitching, because I think he did fine. Command was a little bit off. His cutter wasn't moving as much as it usually does. His slider had nothing on it. Maybe that's just the weather. You hope that's just the weather. Next week when he pitches, he'll be okay. But I'm concerned already about the offense, and that could be an over, dramatic response. But I haven't seen anything change.
Well, I don't think it's too early to be concerned with the offense, because it's the same that we've seen the last few years. They can't get the big hit when they need it most. If they lose 4-0 and Stroman just mows everybody down and it's just one of those days, so be it. But you had, I don't even know how many they had left on base, but they had bases loaded, one out, double play, bases loaded again. Winker, as you said, missed the easy pitch to hit over the fence. And if it
Yep.
wasn't the same issues that we saw all last year and the year prior, and it seems like the year prior, it wouldn't be so bad. So I'm not worried about the pitching. I know last year, unfortunately, the pitching was banged up a lot. 2 years ago, the Brewers had the least, I want to say they had the least amount of starting pitchers used in the 2021 season.
Yep.
Last year, Woody's the only, Corbin Burns is the only pitcher that didn't miss a start. Woody had the ankle injury, and he had the condition where he has an issue with the grip of the baseball, which I'm not looking forward to Saturday for that reason. If you can't
Not with
grip
that
the
weather
baseball really well, that weather tends to flare it up. Peralta can't stay healthy. Hopefully he can this year. I think Eric Lauer was the only one that stayed relatively healthy within the starters. And now you got Wade Miley they bring back. And now Adrian Hauser's on the IL early on. I think he was supposed to be that Ashby role who's on the IL right now. The pitching health, to me, is going to be what makes or break this Brewer season. And hopefully the offense can find some identity. But I think that's going to be the key for the 162-game season is just the pitchers staying healthy and overachieving, kind of like they did 2 years ago, where you had Corbin Burns just dominating, winning that Cy Young.
And you're absolutely spot on with everything you're saying. It's but it goes to where we've been. You can go back to, like you said, 2021 when you go to the NLDS against the Braves and you win 95 games that year and would you score 3 runs in the series? I mean, it's gone all the way back to 2021. It's just been a problem, and I'm not defaulting blame to newly hired general manager, president of baseball operations, Matt Arnold. He just took over in October. He's kind of got a little bit of a mess. I would say that Mark Anasio probably hasn't done a whole lot of favors for him, but again, I'm just guessing on that. But when they acquired William Contreras, I thought that was excellent. I thought that was really the best trade of the offseason for the whole entire Major League Baseball. But I was hoping, and I know everybody's always up in arms about service time, but I said it before, just bring up all the kids. If they're ready to play, and you kept Terrain, obviously you have Mitchell. Let Frelick stay up here. Let Joey Weimer stay up here. I understand everybody wants to talk about service time, but you have got to figure out a way to get some kind of life in this offense. And it was only one game out of 162. They have 161 more to go. But I don't know about you, Evan, and I know you said you didn't watch it. The body language, it just dead. Like just nothing really moving. I mean, maybe they were cold. It was cold. It was low 40s. I think first pitch was 42 degrees. It just, and again, I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy. I don't want to sound like a, pessimistic Brewers fan, because I'm not. I like to stay as optimistic as possible. But until the Brewers show me something different, because I haven't seen anything different, and you can have all the great pitching, right? Like you said, you can have Burns, who led the league in strikeouts last year with 243, didn't miss a start, 33 starts last year. You can have Brandon Woodruff. You can have Freddie Peralta. You can have the former rookie of the year, Devin Williams, in the back end of the bullpen. It doesn't mean anything when you can't score a single run. When you can't bat in a runner with the bases loaded and one out, and you have a lazy chopper to second base or a lazy chopper to shortstop, an easy routine double play or whatever it is. If you got to revert to small ball baseball, bunting, sacrificing fly. I mean, there's got to be, and that's what I think Craig Counsell is going to be challenged with this year, because he has a lot of guys that can produce, just they haven't yet, and it's early. But Winker wasn't healthy last year. Brian Anderson wasn't healthy last year. Christian Yelich, there's a lot of theories about what's going on with him, but he hasn't been the Christian Yelich for 2 years, right? Maybe 2 years.
Since 2019, he hasn't been.
Yeah. So it's like you can only do so much from a managerial, aspect. But I think that you're going to figure out, you're going to see really quickly, I would say in the next 3 weeks, what this Brewer team is going to be. And they can go out on Saturday and they can score 10 runs. And then we're back to being, okay, well, we're good, but it's the last 2 years have been the same story, Evan. And until they show me something different, what am I supposed to believe?
Yeah, and we'll see. And really, since Memorial Day last year, the Brewers haven't really played good baseball. I know they
No,
were still in first place at Memorial Day. They had their best start in franchise history last year. And I know a lot of people, and I know that caused a lot of the issues, but point to the Josh Hader move as being what pretty much destroyed the year, but they were playing bad baseball leading up to it. I didn't have an issue necessarily of trading Hader. It's trading him when they did. I don't think they maximized what they could have got for Hader because they moved to trade him when they're when he's playing bad baseball. He's in a slump. That's when you move him. You should have moved him when he was the dominant closer that he was a few weeks prior to that. But I think they played bad baseball since May. And as you said, they got to find their identity. And I look at the season, there's no reason why they shouldn't be neck and neck with the Cardinals this year. There's really no reason that they should. Cardinals pitching, suspect. Brewers
it is.
pitching,
Yeah,
really
it
good.
is.
That should be
So
enough.
until you get to Hicks at the back end of St.
Yeah.
Louis, their starting pitching is very questionable.
Yeah, but that should be enough to keep the Brewers close to the Cardinals. The question is, do they have enough to get over the Cardinals? And I guess that'll be my question for you. As the roster stands right now, do the Brewers have enough to get over the hump in the St. Louis Cardinals?
I do not think so. I picked the St. Louis Cardinals this morning for my extra points. I keep pumping that out, but I literally just talked about that today, and I pointed to two reasons why. Two big reasons: the reigning MVP and Paul Goldschmidt, and Nolan Arenado, who was just gifted on a silver platter to the St. Louis Cardinals, which actually they got paid for taking him, which funny how that happens. But I'll digress on that. I don't think they have it right now because of kind of what I started off the show with talking about. They're still at more questions than answers. What are you going to get out of Christian Yelich? Can Jesse Winker stay healthy? Can Brian Anderson stay healthy? Are you going to get the 2019 Brian Anderson? What are you going to get out of Willie Adames? Keep in mind, a lot of these guys are coming up on contracts too. So you have that a little bit of uncertainty. Does that linger throughout the course of the season? I know Corbin Burns is a free agent in 2 years, so they have a little bit of control with Corbin Burns. But, are guys going to be looking over their shoulder like, hey, if we don't perform, those trade rumors are they're going to start peaking a little bit. They're going to start breaking into the clubhouse a little bit. And I don't think that's going to be a case. I'm just saying, like, that's everybody. It's a human element, right? If your team's underperforming, if the Brewers are, let's say they're approaching June, middle of June, end of June, and keep in mind, this is when the Cubs sold 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? I think when they sold 2 years ago, when they trade off Rizzo and Bryant, was at the end of June, getting into the All-Star break within a few weeks. And they were just, I think they were 6, 7, 8 games behind the Milwaukee Brewers and the St. Louis Cardinals. And they just said, hey, we're not going to compete going into the rest of the second half of the season. And they shipped off, Bryant and Anthony Rizzo and a lot of their core pieces. So it's just, there's too much, I think, from an offensive standpoint. Look, the game is moving to offense, right? Like, we love pitching. Baseball loves, changing things and adapting to new rules. And that's what they're doing with the pitch clock, which I think benefits the batter, not the pitcher. You saw Stroman kind of struggle with it today. Corbin Burns almost had a few times he took that pitch clock all the way down to like 1. So I think that's going to benefit the batters. I think there's going to be more offense. Obviously, there's no shift. You would think that would help in offense. And I just don't know if it's going to help the Brewers. And if it can't help the Brewers, if they can't get help in their offense of where they have right now, and those questions that I've asked earlier, if they don't get answered and we're still unsure, there's no chance they catch the Cardinals. There's no chance they stay within the Cardinals. And the starting pitching in Milwaukee is way better. But if the Cardinals put up 6 runs, 5 runs, 4 runs was enough today. I mean, that's too much for an offense for the Milwaukee Brewers. I'll tell you what, when it got to 2-0 today, Evan, 2-0, this is before they got out of the inning, obviously. I said, well, that's probably all they really need. And that I shouldn't have that feeling into a new year. But this is pretty much the same team minus, a couple extra pieces, Contreras and Winker. But we don't know what we're getting out of Winker yet. He wasn't healthy last year. He wasn't healthy all the way up until spring training, really. And he's going into a contract year. So it's a contract year for him. So if he's going to underperform in a contract year, Brewers are in big trouble.
Yeah, and I like the Winker pickup, and I guess next step, just kind of get your thoughts on their offseason pickups a little bit more. I like the Winker pickup. Um, I I think Renfro was good for the team last year, but again, he couldn't stay healthy, strikes out a lot. He had a great arm in the field, but now he's on his fifth team in 5 years. That makes me wonder a little bit. But I personally I like Winker better than Renfro as an all around player. I know Renfro's the better outfielder, but I think Winker, especially at American Family Field, as we saw when he played with the Reds, he can rake an American Family Field. He was a Brewer killer, especially in Milwaukee when the Brewers and the Reds played. But as you said, health is going to be the big thing, and then you also get William Contreras. I almost gave him the Brewers their brother.
I always call him William.
Yeah,
or Wilson. Yeah, Wilson.
You get Volt, you get Anderson. Their offseason signings. What are your general thoughts? I know it seems like the usual, dollar store bargain bin shopping once again, but what are your thoughts on the Brewers' offseason pickups in general?
I don't dislike them, but I was underwhelmed by the additions. I really, 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 really like William Contreras. I think he has the opportunity. 25 years old, 5 years of control, an all-star. He was just called up April 28th of last year for the Atlanta Braves. Went to the all-star game, and that's a tough division that he did it in the NL East. So I absolutely love that trade. And keep in mind with that trade too is without Josh Hader trade, that wouldn't have been facilitated. So basically you traded Hader and got William Contreras. How you feel about that, how I feel about that really doesn't matter now. But I really, really, really like that. I gave Matt Arnold a ton of credit for that move. Winker too, because Winker, it's a low, you're buying low and your reward could be really, really high because Winker has been an MVP candidate before. I believe it was 2019 with the Cincinnati Reds before he went over to Seattle, and he had a really good year. And he's going into a contract here. So you assumed, from a baseball aspect, from sports, that if a guy's going into a contract here, he's looking for some money, he's going to have probably a good year. So I really like that one. I shouldn't say kind of, I really like that one. But I was kind of underwhelmed with everything else. A couple additions to the bullpen. You see Varland do the Rule 5 pick who made the team. I thought that was decent. But it was something like where you're going into an offseason where you saw in 2022, they just, like you said, really didn't play well since Memorial Day, lost the division lead, never gave it up or never got it back, and then missed out the playoffs by a game to the team that eventually went on to the play in the World Series. But you go back, you go back to, you're right. You go back to 2021 and it's still like the same thing. It's like, okay, like who's going to carry this team from an offensive standpoint? I love Rowdy. I love the chance at American Family Field for Rowdy. Too inconsistent for me. Willie Adames. Love Willie. Love his energy. Can smack the cover off the baseball. He also strikes out a lot. So his inconsistency is going to be a question. You don't have a consistent player right now. When you look at this lineup,
I think his baseball IQ comes into question at times too. With some
the throw to first base today, I'm like, that's a run right there. That you give up. So it's like, going in, I liked the moves, but I thought that you could have done more. And look, let's just call it what it is, man. Corbin Burns is on his way out. You don't hire Scott Boras and take a pay cut, right? Like he's going to go out and look for $300 million, and he should, because in my opinion, he deserves it. He's my favorite Brewer. He's one of the best. I make the argument that he's the best Brewer pitcher in history of the franchise. But Mark hasn't capitalized on this team. He hasn't capitalized on cheap contracts from Freddie, Brandon Woodruff, and Corbin Burns. And he didn't capitalize when he had Hader here. The only time we've seen him go out and be aggressive was after that 2018 season where they kept, a couple guys. They went out and signed, I believe that was the year they brought Moose back for that 1-year deal. And that was kind of the last of it. Like since then, you really haven't seen him go, okay, my starting pitching is really good. My back end of my bullpen is really good. I have some good pieces because I think when you look at this roster right now, how it's constructed, they're good pieces, but you don't have a piece where you can point your finger at and be like, okay, that one and that one. Yeah, that's our anchors. And then everybody else around them is going to bring the boat together, right? Like you don't have that. You're just hoping Willie Adames gets hot. You're hoping Luis Urias can get hot. You're hoping Rowdy Tellez can hit a home run, with 2 on and 2 out. You're hoping and hoping and hoping, and eventually you're going to get caught, with no hope. And that's kind of where we're headed. And again, I know it's only one game. It's only one, literal game out of 162. But what concerns me is you kind of saw it in spring training. You definitely saw it in 2022, and you saw it in 2021. It's been an ongoing occurrence for this Milwaukee Brewers team. And for me, as much as I hate to say it, starts and ends with Christian Yelich. And that needs to be your anchor. And he hasn't been, and I don't know if he ever will be.
Yeah. 2018, he wins the MVP. 2019, I feel he should have won the MVP again.
Should have. Yeah.
I'm sure if he would have finished out the year, he possibly catches Bellinger. But Bellinger, unfortunately, was somebody they named for before April was even over as the MVP. And you look at Bellinger's numbers the rest of that season, they plummet. Like, he had an outstanding April and a pretty good start to May. Yeah. And outside of that, his numbers just plummeted, where Yelich was pretty consistent the entire year. And then when they gave him the big contract after, he broke his kneecap, they gave him the big contract. And then COVID happened. So you think 2020, everybody's having an off year, COVID screwing everything up. Let's let's see what happens when we have an actual spring training, which last year, or 2021, wasn't really a typical spring training either, because you didn't have fans and there were COVID protocols and everything. 2022, you didn't have a typical spring training either because of the lockout. This is really the first actual typical off season, taking out the World Baseball Classic, but this is actually the first actual typical off season for baseball since 2021, with COVID and the lockout and all, and the protocols and all that. It seems like the Brewers keep, doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for, Yelich to resort back to 2018, 2019. Because if he could resort back to 2018, 2019, that's going to definitely make the offense that much better. And that was one of I loved Stearns and what he had done with the limited resources that the owner gives him. But to me, that was always my annoyance with him, is let's keep putting bargain bin pieces around Yelich and hope Yelich turns it around. And I know Keston Hiura not being able to replicate his 2019 season was a big issue with the Brewers trying to build their offense as well, which now he's off the 40-man roster. But Craig Counsell, last year in his contract, I like Craig Counsell. I think he gets the most out of the pieces that he's given, which isn't a lot. But unfortunately, twice now in the postseason, 2021, 2018, to me, he overmanaged too much and overthought things too much, and they end up getting beat by the Dodgers and then the Braves. In 2018, it was kept going to Jeremy Jeffers, even though he showed he didn't have anything left. 2021, pulling pitchers too soon. Pitchers are doing really well. I'm going to pull them now. What are your thoughts on Counsell? Has he maximized what he can do with the Brewers? Or do you think he should get a contract extension? Or is it, let's see how this year goes first?
That's a good topic and a great question, because it kind of goes back to the beginning of when we started the show, or at least when I jumped on with you. More questions than answers. Why hasn't he gotten a contract extension? Why haven't those talks either been had, or why haven't we heard about them? What's going on with them? You have a lame duck manager. You have Corbin Burns, who is clearly not happy with how things transpired in his arbitration. Woodruff is going to be due money. Adames is going to be due money. Believe it or not, Devin Williams is going to be coming up on the next few years. I think he does, and I've said this for a while, I think Craig Counsell, for as long as he wants to manage in Milwaukee, he will have a spot to do that. I like him. I like him a lot. I think there's times where I agree with you that he overanalyzes, overthinks, pulls a pitcher too early at times. But I it kind of goes to where we kind of talked about it at least a little bit ago, is with, the ownership and general manager, David Stearns before Matt Arnold. You can only do so much with what you got, right? And I think when you're looking at his lineups, and everybody always gets so mad about the lineups, and they're always like, oh, why is Yelich in the 3-hole? Why isn't he in the 2-hole or the 1-hole? Move Rowdy Tellez down, whatever. it's kind of like what we've talked about. He's trying to figure it out, right? He's trying to get something, a spark going into this offense, a jolt of some sort, get guys on base. If you can get Mitchell and Terrain on base, good things are going to happen. And that's why you see them at the bottom of the order, because if they get on base, and obviously you wrap the order around to the top of the order, things usually are supposed to go well, right? But I really like Craig Counsell. I think he's, look, I mean, the winningest manager in Brewers history, that's not like a crazy feat, you know, although congratulations to him, you know, it's a record. There haven't been many great ones here. But I like him. I think the players relate to him. He relates to the players. I think he's provided a winning culture in Milwaukee, obviously gone and went on to win a World Series. You know, he's been there and he knows what it takes. I think he knows the city, right? He knows this fan base. I mean, he grew up right down the road in Whitefish Bay. He knows what it's like to go to, you know, County Stadium, Miller Park, American Family Field, and have a good team. He also knows what it's like to go to those areas, those stadiums, and not have a good team. So I think, you know, I think he's just going to be, you know, doing everything he can do to figure out something with this lineup, with this roster. But again, it just falls back onto where he's only given so much. I mean, his hands are only so tied, right? He can roll out Woodruff, Burns, and Peralta every 3 days, every 5 days, whatever it is, and let them go and pull them, you know, a couple of innings too early. But I mean, if your offense isn't doing anything, you know, that it's an offensive game. It's, you know, we're seeing in the NBA and you're seeing in the NFL, and I know they're all different sports, but baseball wants more offense. I mean, they're trying to attract to the fan base, to the younger fan base. They want more offense, and Craig Counsell, he's trying. I like him. I think he's one of the best managers, the longest tenure manager in the NL, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So as long as he wants to manage in Milwaukee, I don't think Mark Attanasio will ever part from him.
No, I don't think so either. I think if the wheels completely fall off this year, I could see them making a change. But I think I think there's just too much talent for the wheels to come.
I'm curious why that contract is not.
I don't know. Maybe Counsell is thinking about stepping away at the end of the year
because his son's going to be going. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you know this. I think his son's going to college next year, right?
Well, he has one this year that's going, I think, because he had one graduate last year because he did miss a game in June.
Yeah.
His son's graduation. He has another one, I think, graduates this year. So maybe it's Counsell not wanting to commit because maybe he has other ideas. I don't know. And I'm not trying to start any rumors here, but I'm guessing maybe it's because if it's up to Attanasio, I think the contract's done.
Agree.
Maybe
I agree.
It's Counsell that just doesn't want to sign it yet, because it always sucks when you go into a year as a lame duck manager. So 2 more baseball questions. Then I want to jump to something you don't really need to talk about tomorrow now, because at halftime the game's already over. But we'll get to that momentarily. Anyway, banning of the shift. I know for Rowdy Tellez, he was the most affected player for the Brewers last year by the shift. I think he had 66 hits taken away and 66 potential additional hits. Obviously, his batting average is going to jump up. I think last year, I think the league average was in the 230s, lower 240s, and they predict that with the shift being gone, the averages can jump up into the 250 range. What are your thoughts on the whole banning of the shift?
I love it.
Think it's going to make a difference?
I do think it's going to make a difference. I think you're going to see guys like Tellez. I think Yelich is going to eventually hopefully find his groove and benefit from it. He lined into a ton of outs out there, and I guess you want to call it right field, right shallow field. It's what Major League Baseball really wants. They really want to go to a fast-paced, up-tempo, offensive scoring kind of games, and I think that's what you're seeing with the pitch clock and the banning of the shift. And I think you're going to see averages, OPS pluses kind of dip up a little bit above what we saw. Now, I don't think it's going to affect the Brewers a whole lot as far as an offense. I think it's going to help certain players. You mentioned Rowdy Tellez. I'm trying to rattle off some off the top of my head. I know Christian Yelich. It seems to be the left-handed batters more than it is anything. Willie Adames has no problem going to the opposite side of the field. Luis Urias has no problem, and hopefully he doesn't miss a whole lot of time. I don't know a whole lot about William Contreras and his spray chart as far as where he hits the ball, but I feel like he's more of a pull power hitter. So it really might not affect a whole lot of people. Garrett Mitchell's a guy that likes to go to right field. That could help him out. I think as a whole, it's going to help Major League Baseball, period. So you look at it and you're like, okay, does this help the Brewers? Probably not, right? Because if it's helping everybody else, the Brewers got to keep pace with everybody else, and they're unable to do that to begin with. So, is it really helping us? I think it's going to help the game as far as an offensive standpoint. I like it. I've always hated the shift, but there's always going to be these inconsistencies with the defense for baseball. I think they did it in spring training where they brought the left fielder basically into between center and the right fielder. So they're going to find ways to kind of figure it out. But I think eventually it'll even itself out and it'll go back to basically what it was when the shift was here. It's going to help out here and there. Not going to make a big difference, but overall I do like it because it just, to me, it's just fair baseball, right? Like if you're playing Rowdy Tellez and you got three people standing, 20 feet from each other in right field. Like that's not baseball. It's not a position you normally play. So I like it from that standpoint, but I think it is going to help the game of baseball.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to help. I know the shift's been around for a long time, but it really started to get a lot of play, I would say probably over the last 5 or 6 years where it's been talked about a lot more because it's become more common for teams to do it. I didn't mind the strategy of it. Like, cool. It's something a little bit different we don't see all the time. Then you see it all the time, and then guys just can't figure out how to hit the ball down the left field, the left foul line. Just hit it down that line. You're going to be running for days, and they can't figure it out. They hit it so to me, it's I'm kind of glad they moved on from it. The pitch clock.
I like the pitch clock. That game today was quick.
As a producer, weekend producer at TMJ who does the Brewer games a lot, I don't mind it because the games are going to be much quicker. So
yeah,
Saturdays, if it's an afternoon day game, not going to be staying past 6 o'clock.
And that's one that I think can benefit the Milwaukee Brewers more than it maybe other teams, because if you get Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta, you get them three in a groove and they're moving. Freddie Peralta works quick to begin with, right? If you get those three kind of moving and they're going to the dugout, and if they're not sitting for a while, and by the looks of it, the Brewers offense necessarily might not, keep them waiting long.
Yeah.
The sooner they're back out on that mound, they're in a groove. They're going to be punching guys out. So that part might help the pitching at least. I know Freddie Peralta likes it because he moves quick to begin with.
Devin had to make some adjustments because he moved slow to begin with. So
he has
to make adjustments, and he did in spring training and that. Yep. We'll see how he does once he gets his first actual game action. And a guy like Suter would probably love the pitch clock because he would probably see how quickly he can. Was it 15 seconds?
Yeah,
if
15.
On base, 25 when somebody's on base. He'll probably see how quickly he can get it out to the 15 as he can. Try to get out in 14 seconds, or with 14 seconds left on it is probably what he would do. But I know he's in Colorado now. So I have. For me, for the Brewers, I think they're right around 88 wins. I think that could be enough to win the division because this Cardinals starting pitching, I think, is going to be too problematic. Obviously, I don't think they're going to win the World Series because they don't have the offense to do that. Who is your favorite to win the World Series, and who do you think is going to be that team's biggest challenge to win the World Series?
I have kind of the same answer in one. Houston and New York. And I think they're going to be each other's biggest problem going into, the championship. I probably would have had the Mets up there. I want to say San Diego, but they just like the Brewers, right, Evan? They haven't shown me enough you have all this talent, but you can't get to the postseason and you can't win. So from a talent perspective, I want to say San Diego because I love their roster. But it's one of those things where they just haven't shown me. The Yankees and Houston, obviously Houston is the reigning World Series champion. And I kind of really liked Philly too. The Hoskins injury kind of was a bummer in a spring training game, meaningless game essentially with the torn ACL. But I like Houston and New York, two teams that were obviously there last year. Second pitch of the game, Aaron Judge takes it yard, or the second pitch that he's seen, he takes it yard. The Yankees are going to be a problem like they were last year. Houston is always going to be there as far as I'm concerned for the foreseeable future. And what Dusty's doing down there in Houston, they're going to be a problem. And it's kind of to answer your same question, really, they're going to be each other's problems, right? Like I would not be surprised if Houston wins another World Series this year. I won't be surprised if the Yankees win the World Series this year. And I won't be surprised if the reason they win or don't win is because of the other team, right? And so I think that's where it's going to come down to. The NL, the Dodgers are always going to be pretty good. The NL Central, Edwin Diaz, World Baseball Classic, nasty injury where his knee, the Mets, I want to put there too, but like we talked about with San Diego, you can have all the talent in the world. If you're not able to formulate that into a winning success, which we've seen happen with San Diego not being able to get over that hump, that could be New York too. But New York has all the talent in the world to get to the World Series, or at least get deep into the postseason. But a sleeper team for me, if I had to pick one out of the NL, is the Braves. I think the Braves are just one of those constant good teams. You make the big trade for their catcher as they shipped off William Contreras to the Milwaukee Brewers. Max Fried left the game early today. I don't know how serious that is. So, it's all about health, right? It's all about health when you get to the postseason, and the Brewers, unfortunately, always haven't been in the right spot. But if New York and Houston are both healthy, those are my two teams that are going to compete for a World Series, and I know that they both play in the NL. I think if they get to a World Series, Evan, it probably doesn't matter who they play.
Yeah, I think Houston is probably the favorite to win. The Mets and the Yankees, I have the same concern with. Injuries are going to be a problem. Scherzer can't make it through a season healthy. Verlander is already on the IL to start the year, and the Yankees the past couple of years have had a lot of injury issues. So I think Houston is probably the best team, and I wouldn't mind seeing a Houston-Atlanta World Series. I think that would be really fun to watch.
I think that would be good too, and I think Atlanta can do it. I mean, they're loaded too. I mean, they got every piece that you need out of a lineup. They got a good manager, good starting pitching, good back end, good offense. Really, they're complete. It's just about them as well. Staying healthy and getting out of the National League.
And final baseball, then a couple more quick questions. I know you got to get to bed because you got to be up super early in the morning. Corbin Burnes.
Don't remind me.
Does Corbin Burnes finish the 2023 season in a Milwaukee Brewer uniform? Do you think he finishes it, or do you think they move him closer to the deadline?
I love this question because I wrote about this in my extra points. I believe it was last week. I don't, and I'll tell you why. When you look at Corbin Burnes, and it pains me to say this because I love Corbin Burnes. So if you're listening and you're like, this dude is just so negative, I love Corbin Burnes. He's my favorite Brewer. However, if you're operating from the Brewers aspect, right, and you're operating in the way that they choose to operate, right, Matt Arnold, I shouldn't say Matt Arnold, but Mark Attanasio, how he chooses to operate, you have to maximize what you have currently on the roster. Now, he made a mistake, a major mistake, by letting Prince Fielder walk away for nothing, because that's what happened. And I'm hoping he's learned his lesson, because if you are not in contention, you might, even if they are in contention, right? Corbin Burnes is going to demand a massive haul. He is a 2021 Cy Young Award winner, 243 strikeouts last year, led the Major League Baseball. If you go to a team, Team A, we have this guy, Corbin Burnes. What is his arbitration number? 10.1, I think is what it is. Very cheap. And you're talking about a year and a half plus control, right? Depending on when they trade him, year and a half at the very least, if they trade him at the deadline. That's probably when your return is going to be the most, right? If you wait till the offseason, people are going to be like, he only has 1 year. We'll give you half of what you probably would have got. It's kind of like the Packers with Aaron Rodgers and the trade with the Jets. You trade him in his MVP year coming up, you probably get the Russell Wilson package, right? Corbin Burnes can probably get you that Russell Wilson package right now. If you're in baseball terms, you could probably get somebody's going to, let's say, you could even say New York, the Yankees, right? They're trying to get past Houston. Hey, New York, Corbin Burnes here. Think about that 1-2 punch in New York. Oh, we want, X, Y, and Z though. I mean, and you have the ability to tell other teams you have him for more than a year. So when you offer him up to a team, let's say in June or July, you're able to tell that team, and obviously the team's already going to know that, hey, he's got more. It's not a rental. This isn't a rental, right? And if you're a high market team, depending on where Corbin Burns wants to go, you might be able to lock him up long term. And if that's a situation where Scott Boras can work his way into whatever team he gets traded to, and a sign and trade of 300 million, whatever dollar amount he's looking for, I think he needs to be traded this year. And I hate saying that because I just think this is the year where you can get the most for him.
Yeah, trading,
and that sucks, right, Evan? That sucks. It sucks because you don't want that. That's one of your best players ever, really ever. I mean, that's saying something. But it's like the Prince Fielder thing. Would you have traded Fielder in 2011 or let him walk for nothing? You want something back.
Well, would have rather have traded him, hindsight. But
right.
At the same time, do you trade Prince when he's putting up MVP caliber numbers in a playoff race when you're the top team in baseball? That'd be very hard to do.
That's where I think the Brewers are going to have to figure it out, because if you go into, like, I brought up the Cubs thing that they traded off at the end of June because they just realized the value for Rizzo, the value for Bryant was the highest at that moment. They knew they could get them to a team, and the team that they traded Rizzo to, he signed long-term with the Yankees, right? He's still there. So I think if you go into the end of June, and I'm the All-Star break is usually towards the end of July, the trade deadline is usually like that first week of August or so. If you go in at the end of June and you're 5, 6, 7, 8 games behind, and let's face it, it's a very realistic possibility. And it could be third in that order too. I don't necessarily think the Cubs are a pushover anymore either. Don't necessarily think they're better, but I don't think they're worse either than the Brewers. So, I mean, if you're in third place and you're looking up at the Cardinals and you're 8 games behind on June 25th, let's say for, just for theoretical, you're going to get the most for Corbin Burns probably this year. I think it goes down. I think after the trade deadline in this year, the longer you wait, the smaller the package in return is going to be.
Yeah, if you do wait till closer to free agency, the only really good package you're going to get is from a team that he's more likely, the team has a better chance of re-signing him, like a Yankees, Dodgers, Padres, than it would be right now. If you trade him, let's say Houston, you have a chance. I don't know what Houston's farm system looks like, but you have a chance to get a lot from Houston right now if you were to move him, or to the Mets. Well, the Mets, I guess they're willing to buy islands, I guess. So that's not a good answer to that. But I just know they have a pretty strong farm system too, though. So why don't we move to the NBA? And
sure.
I started out the show, and I apologize to Bucks fans because I jinxed it. I said that if the Bucks can get that win tonight, when it was like 17-17, that Boston would have to finish the year 5-0, and the Bucks would have to finish the year 0-5 for Boston to get that 1 seed. Well, it's halftime and the game's over. It's 75-47, and Boston outscored the Bucks by 20 in the second quarter, and it's over. Like, I know no lead is safe in the NBA, but I'm pretty much chalking this up. It's no real reason to play Giannis or Middleton anymore at this point. But Boston, game 1 this year, and I know Middleton wasn't there. They get blown out 139-118 on Christmas. Second time they played, Tatum, Brown, Horford, I believe Smart not playing, and the Bucks barely beat Boston 131-125. Today, everybody's playing. They're down 75-47. They can't stop Tatum or Brown, combining for 42 points at the half. Is Boston, can the Bucks truly get by Boston in a 7-game series if Boston is full go, or is that going to be the Bucks' Achilles heel again this year?
Well, if they get the 1 seed, yes, because I think I would even say if they don't get the 1 seed, yes. I think the X factor for Boston and Milwaukee is we got to kind of look at tonight's game, with a grain of salt. Take it with a grain of salt, because, and I'm not building in excuses for the Bucks, but I kind of already had this one built in the back of my brain. You're coming off of a very weird road trip, right? It was a very weird road trip for the Milwaukee Bucks. They go out to Utah the next day. They burn out Utah, right? They blow them out. Then very next day they're in Denver for a back-to-back, right? So you're in Mountain Standard Time, and then you fly back into the Midwest. You have one off day and you're in Detroit, and then you fly down to Indiana. It was really weird. There's not many times you go west to east for a road trip and then back up to Milwaukee for a back-to-back. Evan, this is their second back-to-back in less than a week. This is their second back-to-back in less than a week. That's like, I don't understand what the schedule makers are doing. Like, why are we doing this in today's world? Why are we doing this for what purpose? Why are you putting Milwaukee and Boston, which is a marquee game, on a back-to-back when Milwaukee's coming off a 4-game road trip?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? And you did it to Denver too. It's Giannis versus Jokic, right? Two of the top 3 MVP candidates. Why are you playing them on coming off a back-to-back? Like, these are just questions that I would have for the NBA is why are we doing this? But I think tonight's just an outlier, right? The Bucks are shooting less than 20% from 3. They're just, legs are probably shot, right? I mean, 4-game road trip, a weird road trip, and then you're on a back-to-back against a big time opponent. But I think the Bucks can beat Boston. I think they probably should have beat them last year, and they didn't have Chris Middleton, which is a very, very vital piece to this offense. So I think once the playoffs get rolling, you prefer the 1 seed if you're the Bucks for so many reasons. I'd rather have a game 7 at home. Giannis has never played in a game 7 at home, by the way, which he said that after, I forgot which game, which was news to me. I didn't know that. But I think if you get these guys, I don't want to say in like an even series, like an even keel game, like Boston was in Milwaukee last night before Milwaukee was. You know what I mean? So they didn't get in until close to after midnight last night. It's tough. That's NBA. They get paid a lot of money, so everybody's like, who cares? But it matters, right? It matters. And I think this is going to be one of those games where you look back, people are going to talk about it for the next 24 hours. You're going to see discourse on the dark web, on Twitter and Facebook, and the Bucks can't do this against Boston. The Bucks can't do that against Boston. The Bucks can beat Boston. I don't think there's a team, if the Bucks are clicking in the way that they should click, not like Drew Holiday scoring 51 and Giannis scoring 38 last night, but if they click in how they're supposed to click, right? And you kind of heard it at the pregame. I don't know if anybody was watching the TNT pregame. Like, a good chunk of their bench players, the role players from Milwaukee, Jay Crowder, Joe Ingles, Pat Connaughton, like, those are starters on most NBA teams, right?
Big Bobby
Portis. Bobby Portis, yeah, who should be in the 6th man of the year. Yeah, underdog. Like, they're good. Like, they're deep and they're good. It's one of those games tonight where you're watching. I have the score pulled up. They're not missing, right? Like, it's one of those games where the other team's not missing and you're missing everything. And that's usually going to result in a lopsided score. And it sucks because had Milwaukee won tonight, like you alluded to, it's all but over pretty much as far as the 1 seed goes. Milwaukee could clinch it with 1 win or a Boston loss essentially and just coast and maybe rest guys heading into the playoffs. But now you got something to play for. The big thing for me, and it isn't really being talked a lot about, I did mention it in one of my extra points last week. I'm still worried about Giannis's wrist. It still bothers me, or his hand. That would be the only thing that would concern me against a series in Boston. If Milwaukee ends up facing Boston in a 7-game series where Milwaukee is not the 1 seed, it's going to go probably 7 games. I think the Bucks can beat, in a home court advantage for Milwaukee, can beat Boston in 6.
Yeah, and I know I sounded like Debbie Downer there, setting up my question to you, but I'm in your camp there, and I worded the question that way because my viewers, my listeners they know my position basically is what you just said, so they knew exactly what I'm going to say. Especially one of my friends in particular, who I guarantee I'm going to get a message at some point that's like, are you going to admit Boston's better, or are you just going to make more excuses for the team? It's probably what I'm
right
at some point tonight after this game goes final. So I just want to get your thoughts on it because, like I said, they're used to my thought, which is pretty much on par with what you're saying. If the Bucks play on all cylinders, I don't think there's a team in the Eastern Conference that's going to get in their way. And it's funny you mentioned Giannis has never played in a Game 7. Honestly, at home, I don't think Giannis has played in a lot of Game 7s in general with the Bucks. Last year against Boston, But the first times they made the playoffs, Milwaukee lost in 4 or 5. They lost to Toronto in 6.
Yep.
I don't think they've even. And then he didn't. I
So
think
Brooklyn in 2021 was
Brooklyn won
7.
7, and Boston last year won 7. That's about it. So he hasn't even
Yeah.
had a lot of game 7s anyway. So,
Yeah.
but it would be cool to have some game 7s in Milwaukee. But you can't go 7. You can't, because Bucks and 6 is what the saying is, not Bucks and 7.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, you also don't want to have the mindset of like, well, we need home court advantage so we can get 7 games again. We can get game 7 against Boston. Like, if you're thinking it's going to go 7 already, like you're already kind of losing a little bit of that mental edge, that you should have over your opponent.
Yeah, but the reason why I want the Bucks to have the 1 seed is not so much for having game 7s at home, if it gets to that, is so if the Bucks end up with the 2 seed, because they can't get the 3 seed anymore. So let's say they do end up with the 2 seed, you play likely the better of the play-in tournament teams, and then you play likely Philly in that second round. So to get to the NBA Finals, you have to go through both Philly and Boston to get to the finals. When the Bucks went to the championship, Philly got knocked out by Atlanta. So you had to get through Brooklyn, and then you had to get through Atlanta. I would rather be that 1 seed. Let Philly and Boston take each other out. Let that series go to 7. Let it, be a drain on both teams, and the Bucks just wait for whoever wins. That's why I want them to get the 1 seed. It's not so much about having the home court advantage, even though that's nice. I would rather have the easier path to an NBA Finals. That's just
sure. Well, yeah, and it's like we've seen it with football with the Packers, right? You want that 1 seed, you want that game at home, and it matters. The easier path is obviously much more appealing. But it's the 1 seed for the Milwaukee Bucks isn't a given either. I know their magic number is still 4 with 5 games left. However, I don't know what Boston's schedule looks like. Milwaukee's schedule is not easy though. Chicago is in there, Memphis is in there. Philly's in there, I believe, Sunday. So they get some rest in between now and Sunday I believe Philly's on Sunday. So it's 3 out of your remaining 5. And then I know Washington's in there. But this is also, keep in mind for Bucks fans too, and anybody that's listening, this is the same team that Boston I'm talking about that just lost by 20 points to Washington. So, I mean, it's an outlier tonight. I wouldn't get, if you're a Bucks fan, I wouldn't be that upset. It's upsetting because it was a golden opportunity to put the stamp on your season and to secure basically all but that 1 seed with a victory, and they just came out just flat. But again, I don't think that's necessarily on them. And I know nobody cares. They're grown-ups and they're grown men and they're playing a game for millions of dollars. But when you're traveling as much as they did, and it was just a weird travel, it was just a weird road trip for the Milwaukee Bucks. You go to the West Coast to the East Coast, then back home on a back-to-back. It's tough. It's taxing on the body. And I think that's what you're seeing tonight. They're just not hitting shots.
Yeah. Well, Boston has an easier schedule, but they kind of have looking back on a weird thing too. So March 28th, they're in Washington. Tonight, they're in Milwaukee. Tomorrow, they're back in Boston to play the Jazz. The 4th, they're in Philadelphia to play the 76ers. And then they have their last 3 at home against Toronto, and then Atlanta.
Yeah, so and I mean those
schedule too.
Yeah, to me that's an easier schedule than the Bucks have because Chicago, the Bucks have recently have dominated, but Chicago still can be tough. They still have good scoring in Chicago with DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. Memphis is obviously kind of having a weird year themselves, but they're still super talented. Philadelphia is going to be a problem. They were last time when the Bucks gave up a 14-point lead in the 4th quarter and lost that game. But it's kind of just it goes to show you, Evan, that when you lose in December, in January, you're giving up these games. The Bucks had some of the worst leads given up this season. The Chicago one sticks out into my head where they were up 11 with 3 minutes left and they lost. They were up 14 against Toronto with like 2 minutes left and it went to overtime. They eventually won that game. But, you win a couple of these games in December, January, and February. None of this really matters. And you already have the 1 seed and you're not necessarily playing for your life essentially for that one, getting to that 1 seed to have an easier path. But I just think that I'm not necessarily worried. I think once this team rebounds, no pun intended, off this game, they're going to be fine on Sunday. I think they're going to beat Philly I believe that game's on Sunday. they're going to beat Philly, and I think that's going to be the next big step. Just tonight it just sucks because tonight would have been the night, right? Like you're at home, you can basically clinch the 1 seed, right? Like there's the magic number would have went to 1. You own the tiebreaker. It's just upsetting, but I fault the NBA. I just don't understand why we do this to the game's biggest stars. And they know, Evan, like they know, like, oh, we're going to schedule Milwaukee and Boston on a back-to-back. It's not like they're not going to be the top 2 teams in the conference or the league, right? Like these guys, like, come on. Like, I don't understand why there shouldn't be a back-to-back in the NBA. Like there's enough time in a season to make it work. You know, I hate, especially when you're coming off the road. Like if you're doing a back-to-back and Milwaukee played Indiana at home last night, that's a totally different story.
Yeah.
But you're squeezing travel in there. And I know Indiana is not across the world, but it's enough on your body and your mind to be taxing to where you have to come back in less than 24 hours and do it all over again. And at the end of the season too, right? They're playing game 5 right now, 76. So it's at the end of the year. So it's a lot.
Yeah. And then Milwaukee does have Memphis left on the schedule too, along with Toronto, Chicago, Washington, and Philly. So
it's not an easy schedule. It's not the worst, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Memphis is trying to get, their positioning back that they lost with the whole issue with John Morant. But, we're in the show quite a bit. Ended on this. I think Rodgers gets moved at right around the NFL draft. We have to put up with Get Up and ESPN and First Take talking about the Packers should just give the Jets trade him to the Jets already and take whatever the Jets want to give him at this point. That seems to be the narrative nationally anyway. Just accept what the Jets are offering and get done with it. I think it'll be close to the NFL draft that it happens. What about you? Not soon NFL draft or after NFL draft? When do you think this deal gets done?
Yeah, I think it's going to be in the next week. I think we have an answer. Owners' meetings usually tend to get things moving a little bit quicker, and those finished up today, or I believe yesterday. So I think you're going to see the gear start to move here on this trade. Albert Breer was on the Rich Eisen show earlier today, and he said it. I'm quoting him. I'm paraphrasing him. He wouldn't be surprised if it happened this week. So I think you're looking at. I think that the concept of the trade, like the structure of the trade, has been figured out. I think what the Jets are trying to do is they're trying to cover their tail and be like, okay, if he doesn't play in 2024, because it is Aaron Rodgers and he may not play in 2024. There's a good chance he won't play in 2024 because I don't know. He's been going over this. I don't know if I want to play or not for the last 3 years. So I think that's what the holdup is, in my personal opinion. The Jets probably want some insurance on that. Green Bay might not be necessarily willing, but I think the most of the trade is probably figured out. I think it's probably been figured out. I think you're waiting. I mean, I don't think Alan Lazard goes to New York if he doesn't get reassurance from Aaron Rodgers. Why would Alan Lazard? Everybody's like, well, he might go to New York anyway. For what? For what?
Wilson?
Yeah, like Odell Beckham Jr. is not a finalist in New York because he's going to get excited for Zach Wilson to throw him the ball. Like he's going to New York. It's not necessarily a matter of if, it's more a matter of when. I would not be surprised if next week at this time we're discussing the package that was in return for Aaron Rodgers. And at this point, Evan, I'm going to be quite honest with you. When this first came out, I was like, I want a first round draft pick. I don't care anymore at this point. I'm done. If they don't get a first round draft pick, fine. If they get a second, great. If they get 2 seconds, even better. Whatever they get, there's talk about maybe being 2024 being a second that can turn into a one, depending on if Rodgers plays, whatever. I'm just ready. And I love Aaron Rodgers. He's in my basement on the wall all over. But it's been mentally exhausting. And you know this as a Packer fan, every single offseason. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? You got to turn into the Pat McAfee show to get answers from your quarterback. And Brian Gutekunst probably has to too, because he's not talking to him either. So whatever needs to be done, make it happen. I think you're going to see it happen within the next week. I think the owners' meetings are always beneficial for stuff like this, where guys can get in a room, right? And Joe Douglas and Brian Gutekunst, they know each other very well. They used to be on the scouting trail together. They know Woody Johnson, Mark Murphy. They have a working relationship. Mark Murphy and Woody Johnson being a part of the Brett Favre trade back in 2008. Obviously, Matt LaFleur and Robert Saleh, best friends, literally best friends. One of them was, I believe, Saleh was Floor was his best man at his wedding. So there's a lot of good relationships going on with the two teams. I think you're going to see it happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the reason why I point to draft, because draft typically is, if you want draft picks this year, that's typically when you have to get it done. So that's why I'm thinking that. So do appreciate you coming on, talking with me here tonight. If you keep talking about this extra points, and I could easily, direct people, but throw it over to you if you could direct people. You talk about extra points, talk about that and where they can find it.
Sure. Yeah. You can listen to me if you're local, or you have the 620 WTMJ app every morning from 5 to 8. Extra points is on the WTMJ website. If you go to shows, scroll down to the bottom, you'll see extra points. And all it is a opinion based. It's roughly, they tell me, Evan, it's got to be like a minute to a minute and a half. It's always like 2 minutes. So I can never shut up. So it's just a quick hit of, really, it's a freedom of whatever I want to do. Every day I can talk about something else. So usually it's centered around Aaron Rodgers, my thoughts on the Green Bay Packers, my thoughts on Jordan Love, my thoughts on the Milwaukee Brewers. Tomorrow, my thoughts will be on the Milwaukee Brewers, and everybody will come after me. I called Greg Gard to be fired 2 weeks ago. So I talk about it, a little bit of everything. Usually I try to focus my thoughts on like current stuff, right? So now I'm not talking about, well, the Packers in 2020 should have won against Tampa Bay. No, it's always about kind of what's happening in the, Milwaukee, Wisconsin sports world in the current time. So tomorrow will probably be about, I'll probably turn my attention to the Milwaukee Brewers, maybe. But yeah, at WTMJ.com and just scroll up to extra points.
Cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate you joining me. And
Thank you.
Hope you have a great rest of your night. And I'll talk to you at some point.
Absolutely, sir.
As much anymore since now you're the morning show, but
we got the opposite schedules there.
But have a good night, sir.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate you.
Yep. So promise not to keep you guys much longer show than I normally do. But hey, Brandon has a ton of knowledge, brought up some great points, wanted to get him on, get his thoughts on what was going on in his thoughts with the Brewers and how the season's going to go. And, I definitely agree with what he said about the Bucks. Outlier game. I think that's what tonight is. It's an outlier game. Boston isn't better than the Bucks. They're playing better than the Bucks tonight. I think that's safe to say. But 82 game season, lots of travel recently for Milwaukee. I guess the nice thing with this game, the way it's going, you're going to have pretty much the entire fourth quarter of sitting Giannis, Middleton, Holiday, sitting those guys. Again, the entire fourth quarter where those guys are sitting. So now you're going to go to playing Philadelphia on Sunday and hopefully be fresh and get that victory. So this doesn't really mean much today. But don't panic, Brewer fans. Don't panic, Buck fans. It's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. And with that, I appreciate you all watching the show. I was going to talk some Aaron Rodgers more in depth about comments Goody made at the owners' meetings this week and whatnot, but I'm going to pass on that. Going to probably do that next week. See if there's an update for the Bucks. See if there's an update on Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Brandon says probably within the next week or so, a couple weeks, the trade should be done. I think it'll be close to the draft. We'll see what happens. Once again, Brandon, thanks for coming on. Find them at WTMJ.com. Listen live if you're listening to that anywhere in the country. Download the WTMJ mobile app, or you can listen to 620WTMJ.com for the morning show with Vince Vetrano and Debbie Lodzica and Eric Bilstead, Greg Hill. Great group of guys, great show. Check that out. And then his extra points he's talking about, go to WTMJ.com and you can find it there along with a lot of other shows and content as well. So before I do let you guys go, just want to let you guys know baseball season started, as we know. Brewers lost 4-0 today. Baseball tickets are available for every game this year. Bucks playoff tickets are coming up. Concerts are starting to come up. Well, you can go Ticketmaster.com or StubHub or SeatGeek and pay ridiculous amounts of money in fees. You can. You buy $50 tickets, end up spending $80 because of taxes and fees. Well, I got a solution for you on that, and it's TickPick. You are fee-free ticket. So if it's a $50 ticket you're buying, you're paying $52 after tax. An easy way to find it, go to @EvanWittSports. Go click on the link in my bio on Twitter @EvanWittSports. Click on the link on my bio, the Linktree bio. Click there, and you're going to click on TickPick fee-free tickets. Click there, find your event, find your seats, buy them, and there you go. It's that simple. Facebook.com, Evan Wittallison. I have that same link in my bio there. Go to, get your tickets through that way, and you don't have to worry about those annoying ticket fees again. Again, @Evan Witt Sports, Evan Wittallison on Facebook. Click on the Linktree link and click on TickPicks, and you can get your fee-free tickets to any event anywhere in the country, and you don't have to worry about spending $20, $30, $40 worth of fees. So with that said, have a good rest of your night. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you all later, hopefully talking about a Bucks win from Sunday, as tonight's not going to happen, as the Bucks are now down 108-64 in the third quarter. So that game is over. So thank you all. Talk to you later. Have a good one.